The Flying Feather, written and illustrated by Beady Graft. Copyright 2014. On a cold, windy night, a blue, brown, and white bird flew over 10 tiny houses. "Brr, I'd better get home quickly," said the bird as it started flying faster. The bird flew so quickly through the strong wind that, poof! One of its feathers came loose and started a journey of its own. After gliding through the wind for a while, the feather made its way into the dark woods, where a baby caterpillar had lost its family in the storm. It was stuck on a big tree and could not yet climb. How was it going to find its family? Luckily, the caterpillar was swept up by the feather, which, in a wild and windy flight, brought it back to its family. "Thank you, Flying Feather, and good night," called the caterpillar family after the feather as it continued its journey in the wind. In a different part of the woods, Mr. and Mrs. Bear were having a big argument just before bedtime. What had started it, they could not even remember. Luckily, just when Mrs. Bear was about to say something unfriendly to Mr. Bear, the feather flew in through the window and tickled her nose. Huh? 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 Achoo! Mrs. Bear let off a giant sneeze. The sneeze was so big, her hair ribbon flew off. This made both Mr. and Mrs. Bear laugh, and their silly argument was forgotten. "Thank you, Flying Feather, and good night," they called as the feather continued its journey in the wind. Whose bottom was that sticking out of the side of a tree? It was the owl's bottom. Unlike us, owls sleep during the day and are awake at night. And this silly owl was oversleeping. Luckily, just like it did to Mrs. Bear's nose, the feather tickled the owl's feet. This made the owl wake up laughing. "Oh my, I woke up just in time," laughed the owl as it flew out of its hole and perched itself on a tree branch. "Thank you, Flying Feather, and good day," the owl called after the feather as it continued its journey in the wind. Because the weather was not only windy, but also rainy, there were big puddles on the forest ground. For us, this is not a big problem, but for ants, each puddle is like an ocean. This poor ant's house was on the other side of a big puddle, and it could not swim. How would it get home? Luckily, the feather whirled down into the puddle, and the ant could use it as a boat to safely cross. "Yippee! This is fun!" cried the ant as it enjoyed its first ever boat ride. Now safely on the other side of the puddle, the ant was just about to enter its house when it noticed that the feather was stuck in the mud. "Oh no," said the ant. "You have been so helpful to me, beautiful feather. I couldn't possibly just leave you there in the mud." Ants can lift things much heavier than themselves, and so the little ant pulled the feather out of the mud and carried it home. After it had been squeezed into their house, the feather was given a good scrub by the entire ant family. Once it was squeaky clean, the ants released the feather back into the wind. "Thank you, flying feather, and good night," they called after it as it continued its journey. In a different part of the woods, a mouse was tired after spending all day looking for something soft and warm to sleep under. For its new house, it already had a bed, but no bed covers. It was already very late, so the sad mouse decided to go home. Back at home, the mouse tried desperately to fall asleep, but it was simply too cold and uncomfortable. "I'm never going to fall asleep like this," sighed the tired mouse. Luckily, in that moment the feather flew into the mouse's house and provided it with a warm, soft blanket. After a long flight, the feather's journey was over. And so you see that something as little as a feather flying in the wind can make a big difference. "Thank you, flying feather, and good night," yawned the mouse and drifted off into a wonderful sleep.